Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards here, and you're watching the Ultraviolet Podcast. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Bullshido Master Frost. Frost is a blogger, online personality, and founder of several forums where he and his fellows use what they refer to as the art of Bullshido, using lessons that they have learned through studying mixed martial arts to combat bullshit that they find online, which is a skill that all of us could absolutely stand to have more of in our repertoire. Frost and I talk a lot about bullshit, identifying bullshit online, how to circumnavigate it, how to combat it, how to deal with people who are espousing bullshit, and how to identify people who may be susceptible to bullshit and how we can prevent them from succumbing to said bullshit. We also talk a lot about masculinity, male role models in society, what it means to be positively masculine in a world where gender identity is sort of in flux for a lot of people. We also talk a lot about conspiracy theories and the modern landscape of navigating that nebulous web of bullshit that often preys on people who have internalized feelings of insecurity relating to their own masculinity, and how that can make people, unfortunately, easy prey for those who want to exploit them and turn them towards more bullshitty type shit. It was a really fun conversation. I really enjoy Frost's content. I follow him on Twitter a lot, and he's just a really good dude to have a back and forth with, and we talk a lot about a lot of different things. And I think that there needs to be more of what he does in the world out there, which is putting forward a positive uh, space and image for young men who are not sure what their role in the world should be, which is something that I have tried to do here on this channel. I've not been necessarily explicit about it, but a lot of the design choices about this channel, the way I conduct myself on here, is with an understanding that I appeal to a certain demographic, and that I want those young men who may look at me to be better people, and to not be toxic people, and to not be susceptible to bullshit. So I was really, really happy to get Frost on. It was a great conversation, and I'm not going to keep you from it any further. So I give you Frost. Frost, thank you so much for joining me. How are you, man?
Doing great, doing great. This should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, I hear tell, are an expert in the art of bullshido. Uh, and I am a mere supplicant. I've been practicing bullshido at an amateur level for probably about 6 months to a year now. Do you want to maybe tell everybody what that art form is and how you came to be a master?
Well, the short version of the story is that about a million years ago, almost 20 specifically, we a bunch of cranky people on an internet board came together to uh, discuss basically bullshit in the martial arts, and
Hmm.
so uh, that's what we were focused on originally. Somebody had tried to shut down a discussion of somebody. We were looking into some shenanigans, some shady stuff, and we realized we needed our own platform so we could have an open conversation where we wouldn't be uh, subject to censorship or, as the kids call it today, canceling. Um,
Hmm.
so we started it up, and just our hands off approach, our no holds barred sort of MMA approach to forum discussion kind of attracted a lot of interested parties. And, we quickly went from a handful of knuckleheads to uh, tens of thousands, all the way up to, at our peak, we had, I think the old boards had 340,000 members. Um, and that spawned this approach to everybody not just discussing stuff, but getting together in person to uh, have face to face or face to fist conversations about martial arts. Um, And from there, we kind of just the mission expanded and grew over the years. Once we realized that, hey, we've got a thing, and our approach sort of works. Probably not the most civilized way of going about doing things, but the cool thing about the martial arts is that if you look at things through that lens, it's very empiricist, as in
Mhm.
you make a claim, okay, let's try and falsify the null hypothesis. And usually that involves a fist to the face. And if only everything else was so easy. So
Yeah.
now in about little less than 10 years ago, we started realizing, okay, hey, everybody who's got any common sense realizes what martial arts looks like when it actually works, because thanks to the UFC and the popularity of mixed martial arts in general. So we flew the mission accomplished banner for the most part. Stood on the aircraft carrier. I actually photoshopped myself in it. It was funny, but and started like expanding out and using the same sort of general approach to health and fitness in general, and like especially the supplement industry. A
Mhm.
lot of the crap out there. And in fact, I've mentioned this before, but a great heuristic to identify if somebody is a grifter, con man, whatever, is if they're selling supplements. Now, of course, that's not a
Yeah.
100% thing, but when Alex Jones has his own line of supplements, I mean, come on. So it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And then uh, it we kind of hit an important sort of vein of the zeitgeist as 2015 turned into 2016, and we saw the rise of oh, I don't even want to go too.
Stuff.
Yeah, I mean the thing that inspired the hat that I'm wearing, this kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
and so it, after that happened, we the group of knuckle draggers that the website had, the community that we'd formed, just started calling bullshit on other things, and it worked out that we were right place, right time, and our mm, less than tactful philosophy is is pretty useful in a day when social media, uh, their algorithms highlight uh, combative interactions and things that,
Yeah.
create discord, or for them create content and engagement. So
So what would you say is like if you were to break down your approach to dealing with bullshit? You mentioned like the MMA specifically was this sort of testing ground for and I remember when that first started kind of coming around, it very much took the wind out of the sails of a lot of McDojos and things like that. And um it was very interesting to watch that happen live, as karate,
hmm,
you know, studios and malls started having to shut down because nobody was able to they just couldn't sell their product
yep.
anymore. And there is like this purity to the like testing something to the point where it breaks, and when it breaks, you say, "Well, now we know what it's capable of, and this is how it works, and this is how it doesn't." That violence specifically admits of, and I'm wondering how you fold that into dealing with ideas and bullshit specifically.
Well, clearly you can't just go beat the crap out of
Yeah,
somebody. I mean, although God, that would be so easy, wouldn't it?
it would be nice.
Uh, but their approach for a lot of us, because when I started this, I wasn't a scientist. I wasn't working in the science. I was literally in Silicon Valley, as a junior tech bro, and so but we bumped into it, and it is the experimental approach. Put up or shut up. Show me your receipts. Let's see if we can do this. You make a claim. Okay, let's see if you can follow through with that claim, and it's really easy. Now there's a lot of different other confounds and things that go into it, like athleticism, for example, and somebody could have great technique in a martial art, but they're just completely athletic kind of bag of cookie dough, and so they're not
Mhm.
really able to implement it. So you have to factor those things in, but we try to go to the baseline, the average person, and from there you expand to like the whole range of things. So we backed into, like I said, an empiricist mindset when it comes to claims about things, and so it's it helped a lot of people that hadn't gone through academic, you know, training, had never even learned what a null hypothesis was, to
Mhm.
to grasp content or the concepts intuitively. And and I think that's how we ended up with a bunch of people that were more minded towards science and more open to it, who might not have been otherwise. And then on the flip side, we had the angle of, okay, I mean, dudes mostly, because our community, frankly, is mostly dudes.
Mhm.
Even at our peak, we maybe had like 10%, you know, women involved, but it appeals to a certain sense of masculinity and pride. And, you know, well, most guys want to see themselves as tough guys.
Mhm.
It's, testosterone has a, has a bit of an effect on brain chemistry, but and so that also appealed to those type of people too. So we we created this interesting soup of personalities,
Mhm.
and at one point, those of us on the backside of things started realizing, hey, this is an important thing, and it became our mission to try and keep a lot of these people, which I and we have identified correctly as more or less pretty much dangerous dudes, dangerous people in general. Um, that it would be so much better if people that are not inhibited so much from throwing punches and in situations, to have a better set of critical thinking tools,
Mhm.
to so that if you're a fighty guy and you're scrappy and you've got things that you believe in, it's important that those things are conciliant with reality, because then if you have a set of critical thinking tools, it's like having a set of self-defense skills against being exploited, against martial arts. It's like a sociological jujitsu. Those the demagogues are out there trying to get you all riled up about something, and if you if you got it in your head, oh hey, he's using this maneuver, okay, you're not
Mhm.
going to be caught in it. You're not going to end up tapping out and maybe, I don't know, storming a capital or something like that. So I kind of feel like if we had more penetration in our efforts, and maybe this is me just being a little grandiose here, but if we had the ability to reach everyone that we wanted to reach, I don't think the
Mhm.
6th of January would have happened. So, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously you can't, everybody wants that much influence, but I
Right.
think our approach would be good to reach some of those people that they just want to fight about something. They feel like
Mm.
their life needs some kind of grand battle. And not to derail this too much, but a lot of us that grew up in the '80s, because I'm out of the '80s,
Mhm.
uh, I'm past I'm well before the millennials. So a lot of us grew up with all that media that was telling us as kids. It's like, man, you got to go fight a battle. You got to take over and defend, freedom against the ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule. You're GI Joe and you're going after Cobra, or that kind of thing. And so we have that seeded in us. And so I think if you can take that approach, that, and I don't know, I don't want to jump a little bit too far and say that every dude has that sort of
Mhm.
perspective on the world, but a lot do. And if
Yeah.
you can take that and give it some shape and get some people focused on solving actual problems in society that aren't ones that people are trying to get you to do for their own
Mhm.
benefit, that will actually benefit the people that are trying to solve the problems. I
Yeah.
think we could, man, we would have water parks on Mars right now.
Yeah. I agree. There is a certain amount of delicious irony there, and that what you just described is not that dissimilar to like Tai Chi redirecting of energy. So
Yeah, although it's probably not a great martial art to
no, no,
reference,
no.
just given the how
Y-
useless it
eh,
is.
Yeah, no, which is thus the irony.
Yeah.
Um, so, wh- so there's a lot there that you just said that I kind of want to unpack individually, but the big thing I think in our current milieu, like where we live right now in the world, is I think you're right. There's a lot of dudes out there who have been told from the time they were children that they were gearing up for a fight, some like grandiose battle in this world that they need to be ready for. And the world, and we can argue about whether or not that fight exists or not. I think there are several worth fighting currently, but the majority of those people have been given targets to go after that are not actually valid. They're very ephemeral or they're very hollow. And I think there is some utility in redirecting them into useful, socially productive avenues of engagement. And how do you do that? Like, say you've got a dude who's primed to go into the Capitol on the 6th, and maybe not that extreme, but like he's a proto version of that, and he shows up in your community. What is the technique that you use to sort of move him into something more productive?
I mean, you identify that the person's angry,
Hmm.
and you try and if I was talking to like somebody one on one, I get it.
Hmm.
Anger is a strong emotion, and because it's a strong emotion, it makes you feel strong. So sometimes, I mean, I even personally, I know if I'm in a situation I'm a little unsure, and then but I also have a little spark of anger, I'm not as unsure about it. So if you understand why somebody's angry, they might not understand. So you have to work through
Hmm.
it. And some dude like that, it's cool. Be angry, man. Just be angry at the right thing and figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't hurt yourself. So
Hmm.
I'm not certainly not a therapist. However, I mean I've taught resiliency classes for the army. I've done things like that. So if you understand why you feel the way you feel, it's easier to avoid being pushed in a direction that's against your own best interests. And there are so many people out there trying to jerk you around by those little buttons that you have on you. Is like, oh, be angry, be afraid, be worried that somebody's coming for your stuff. They're trying to take your things. They're trying to, they're trying to mess with your kids. They're all these sort of things that are out there. And if you understand, if you see the jujitsu behind it all, if you see the techniques of those demagogues and everybody that wants to get you riled up, then you're like, okay, cool. You're just batting them away. You're just yeah, nothing, slipping, you're dodging. And so dudes like that need to understand it's cool to be angry, man. I mean, there's a lot to be angry about right now. There really is.
Hmm.
Don't feel bad about being angry. Use it. Use it
Hmm.
for the right thing. So,
Hmm. What would you say in your experience in dealing with folks like that has been what are the big, we mentioned, be afraid for your children, they're trying to take stuff from you, but what are like the big things that are used as points of manipulation for our bro friends out there?
I would say that honestly, the biggest one is identity. Uh,
Hmm.
if you see yourself as belonging to something that you feel gives you a little bit better position in the world that you're proud of, okay, I can understand that. I mean, anecdote. I for the longest time, my family swore that we had a Scottish heritage. We're like, oh man, you're Scotland. There's our clan has a ruins of a castle up there in the Highlands and blah 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 blah. And I ran my 23 and Me, and I'm like 60% German. I'm like, all right. So I have a kilt in my closet, and I'm like, all right, okay, damn. But I mean, don't tie yourself into that. Yeah, because I get
Yeah.
disappointed, man. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna eat some haggis. Haggis is gross, but dudes that need an identity out there that haven't cultivated one based on their own characteristics and their own values and their own morals will latch on to one that's nicely prepackaged, that's ready to go, and makes
Mhm.
you feel better. But 9 times out of 10, as we all know, it's trap. It serves somebody else's interests, and half the time, I mean, a lot of the time, it gets into race. It gets into figuring out who you are versus the other. It's
Right.
very tribalistic, and if you can show people where those all those things intersect and how that works, they're going to be less likely to be exploited by it.
Yeah. I don't know specifically about the martial arts community because I've never really been into martial arts. I'm big into like weightlifting and stuff like that, but um, that is an area where I've lacked, and I certainly it's a bad time to get into it now,
Oh yeah.
unfortunately. But I have a lot of experience with the firearms community. That is an area where I have uh, most of my experiences is looking straight down the lane I'm shooting at because if I look over this way, I'm going to run into something that I just don't want to deal with because there's a lot of bullshit in the firearms community.
Oh yeah.
Um, but specifically, I think about the advertising and like gun rags, and if you look at that, pretty much every aspect of it is perfectly calibrated to if you are somebody who is even the slightest bit insecure in your masculinity, they're going to turn that screw to try and sell you the next big pew pew thingy thing that
Yep.
you're going to use, like to shoot the bad guy while you're jerking yourself off at the
Yeah.
same time to protect your family. And I wonder if there are parallels there, because that seems like just a huge thing for them to hone in on anybody who's even the slightest bit insecure with
Well,
themselves.
absolutely. I mean, in the martial arts world, that's the main selling point to a lot of people is all going all the way back to the I think that was ads for like Charles Atlas, and there were like judo ads in
Mhm,
old comic books that pulpy pulpy stuff is like don't get sand kicked in your face on the beach, stand up
mhm.
for your girl, learning how to fight using whatever. I think Count Dante was one of those people that was selling those, just like ninja tactics and all that nonsense. So oh yeah, I know, and I guess I can be part of the firearms community as well, so I know how that goes. There's some awful crap out
Yeah. Do you find that when you what specifically do you find is like the big trigger for people who are concerned about that? Because I I feel like that is probably the biggest vector of attack for young, confused men, right? There are, not to give like the whole Tyler Durden speech, but we have generations of men who are who feel as though their place in the world is in sort of this ephemeral place. Things are changing. What it means to be a man is somewhat changing. And I think that I welcome that examination on balance. But at the end of the day, I think there are people who feel lost and confused. And many times when we have people who are lost and confused and young, they're going to be preyed upon and they're going to lash out. And is that something that you
well,
see?
we absolutely have a dearth of good male role models
Hmm.
that model positive, uh, non-toxic masculinity that are just good dudes, strong dudes, somebody that you want to
Hmm.
be like. I mean, guys in sports have a little bit easier time of it because there are some good dudes in sports. And I'd actually asked this question on Twitter a while back about some good examples of masculinity on one end of the political spectrum, because I know the other end of the political spectrum is they try and corner the market on that, but
Hmm.
I wouldn't say that's the healthiest type of masculinity. It's
Right.
mostly performative, insincere, and just off the rails. But so yeah, I mean, the kids growing up today don't have that, and I see some of those kids come through like our training programs for the military. To be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of the military. This is all me,
Mhm.
so got to put that disclaimer out there. But it really is. There's not a lot out there to look at and say, hey, this is a good example of what I can be, and not to be a little bit too traditionalist, but if you push it back on the dads, and we fail to do that. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are trying to say, "Hey, yeah, we need to strengthen up the relationship fathers have with their sons," but it's one of those it takes a village things. So
Mhm.
it's complicated, man.
Yeah.
And when you have those gaps, you have people that are just ready to slide in there. Speaking
Yeah.
of, I mean, another movie that Edward Norton was in prior to this is a perfect example of that. Is American History X, where
Mhm.
the the Nazi guy was preying on all the young dudes looking for a sense of belonging and masculinity to send them off to do a heinous shit. So that's
Yeah. I mean, it's an old story, unfortunately. I actually remember, the thread you're talking about where you asked about positive masculine influences who are on the leftist end of the
yeah,
spectrum, and somebody actually, mentioned me in that thread,
yeah.
which
There we go.
I thought was, quite nice, and that's actually something that I've been online publicly for, like, a year, and, I've been very conscious about the fact that I am a bald, goatee, traditional looking like, if I put on a pair of Raptor shades, like, I don't look out of place at at January like, you would
Yep.
see somebody like me storming the
Yeah.
Capitol,
Oh yeah.
and, so I try very intentionally to present myself in a way that I think are positive for men to present themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like the lighting choice, right, is not, like the
I like it.
bisexual lighting is not just a throwback to BreadTube, but it's very much a, "Hey, dudes can like pink." Like,
Yeah.
which seems like a basic thing, but, like, for a lot of people, I think even that little bit of basic is I've had people comment on my YouTube videos and say that watching me play Stardew Valley, like, made them feel more like a man because they'd never seen a dude play, like, what they thought was a chick's video game before, and I worry so much about people like that who are, like, that vulnerable that, you know, they're
Yeah.
because that's a dude that if somebody was like, "Hey, what are you playing a girl's video game? Why don't you go da 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 da," and 5 months later, he's, God knows where he is.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's there's a lot of nonsense out there, and honestly, I trace a lot of it back to how things are commodified.
Mhm.
Like everything that is sold to men is it's just honestly, you don't need a truck that's the size of a small like boat. You don't need all these things. Now, I'm guilty of this. I've got a big ass lifted FJ, and
Mhm.
it's over the top. I've got shit hanging off the side of it. I had an axe on the back for like a year. It
Right.
it looks cool as hell, and you know what? Fun. It's fun, man. If I have to take it off road, cool. But the fact that I also before that had a Prius. I had this
Yeah.
tiny little like dinky ass Prius, but I loved that car. It drove me all over the damn country, and I would I'd throw fists with somebody that talks shit about it because that car I hit two different deer. I've hit like all kinds of things, and it just kept going, like almost 200,000 miles on the damn thing. So
Mm,
you have to break those things, and it helps to have dudes that are obviously physically they have a physical presence. They are just on a cursory glance representative of what is conventionally understood as masculinity. There's a
mhm.
whole continuum of a conversation that can be had on what that means,
Right.
which I try to avoid. So I
Right.
yeah
We can sidestep all that. I have had that conversation on this channel numerous times and will
yeah
continue to have it. You do not need to be a representative for it. We can skip over it.
yeah okay that's great because I mean it goes into a whole thing and I
Mhm,
understand I try to understand all the different perspectives on it
mhm.
and even the one that were like it you don't need this. We should be beyond having
Yeah.
this kind of
And
bimodal thing.
and I actually, like, am sympathetic to arguments for gender abolition myself, but, I understand that that is a long-term project, and,
Yeah.
again, we don't have to have that conversation right now, we can just talk about dude stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And because I mean, I, until the entire culture changes, it's a thing.
Mhm.
It's going to exist, so we might as well deal with the reality that we got to make things better
Right,
within our circle of circle of influence. So,
right.
and one of those things is just getting dudes who are wired by nature or nurture or both to look at their options for how to be from a critical perspective. And I wouldn't describe myself as on the left. The only time I've really affixed a label to me is basically saying the you could call me a centrist, but that's just because I am in between some of the frothing extremes. But I mean, I have people that are constantly nudging me leftward, and
Mhm.
I respect their views. at one point, just to yeah, to get into that, I carried a copy of Atlas Shrugged and thought it was the greatest book of all time, and whatever. And I grew up a little bit, so it's important to show people that masculinity exists across the every at most of the points on the political compass, but more importantly, to understand how it is. I hate the word weaponized at various points. I mean,
Mhm.
even Mao used to love it taking like impressionable, 13-year-old, adolescent males and said that those are a great soldiers because they're fearless and they're hyped up and they're ready to go. So uh, just
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know where I want to give you the chance because I know I'm just going
N
off on a tangent here.
Oh, no, you're fine. I so politically, I do absolutely identify as a leftist, which I think most people assume smuggles in some type of authoritarianism, and in my case, that is not the case. I generally identify when I do use a label, which I tend to eschew labels, but I tend to identify as a libertarian socialist. So I'm very, very skeptical of centralized power structures, and I have a lot of sympathy for libertarian thinking. Um, and basically, the my elevator pitch for my politics comes down to that I think uh, everybody should have free and equal access to the things essential for human survival. So, food, shelter, medical care, and the things necessary for participation in society. So, education, communication, transportation, and that we should have the smallest government possible to facilitate that.
I agree.
That's my, yeah, that's my elevator pitch for my politics. And I think most people agree with that statement, I've found, regardless of where they fall on the political compass, if there's somebody who I tend to interact with. Where we get into disagreements is what is preventing us from achieving that, and I would argue it's capitalism, but we don't have to have that conversation today.
No, no, I mean, I understand that, to an extent. A lot of the appeal for
Mhm,
people that are, because I mean, there's a ton of libertarians across the board, left,
mhm,
right, on
right,
on that part of the axis. There, are and it overlaps with masculinity is the
mhm,
self-made man narrative, the I'm showing my strength and how to succeed in a rough and tumble world and my ability to conquer the environment, which happens to be buildings and jobs and commutes to work and shit. So but I think what broke for me when it came to that, and what really clicked, is that the underpinning of a lot of the stuff on the further right was the natural no the just world
mhm,
fallacy. Basically, like, people get what they deserve. And once
mhm,
I realized, wait a minute, this is what's under all that line of thought is like, hard worker, you're gonna get out there, and you're gonna get what you deserve. And it's really not. There's so many different factors that go into how whether or not somebody's successful, and luck is a huge portion of that. And until you recognize that how lucky you are to have all the advantages that you have versus somebody who has all the deck stacked against them. I mean, you got dealt a hand. You got three aces from birth.
mhm,
I mean, come on, man. Um,
yeah,
and I think a lot of the pushback on it in this discourse these days is from people that are like, I'm just good because I'm good, not because I got dealt all these sort of advantages, and they don't want that taken away from them.
yeah. I'm a huge, huge believer in moral luck. I know that you've been on Aaron's show, and
Yeah,
Aaron was a guest on here as well. And I really am a fan of that concept that he pushes a lot, which is not only are you lucky to have been born to, say, the family that you're born to, or have the circumstances that you are to be born wealthy, to be born in X country, to be born in Y country, but you're lucky if you were born intelligent. You're lucky if you were born physically capable. You were lucky in, you have no control over really the person that you are other than you you played the hand you were dealt very well, and the mechanism by which you were able to play that hand well is also a feature of luck. So I think there's a certain amount of humility that comes from realizing that this person on the other side of an imaginary line, for want of very few nails, there go I. And we really should be viewing ourselves as companions in this life and, comrades rather than as adversarial.
Yeah.
And I find like strength in that. I find that as a source of, if you want to call it a masculine identity, is looking at all the people in the world who are unlucky, where I have been lucky, and saying, I'm going to struggle to improve your life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I actually completely agree. In fact, it's one thing to have the strength to pull yourself up, but
Hmm.
it's another thing to be strong enough to pull others up with you and to
Hmm.
get them to the top of that pyramid, like drag everybody up. Let's get up there so we can, because I don't want to be at top of pyramid. I want to be in space. I mean, that's existentially, that is my like grandiose sort of, goal is to get the human race off this dumb planet. Uh,
Yeah. I'm so I think about that, right? Like, it's possible that we may not be meant to leave Earth. I think we should try, right? I think that we should. I'm not a technophobe, right? I'm not like one of these anti-civ people. I think we should be pursuing advanced technology. I think we should be exploring the stars. I think we should probably be doing it with robots instead of people for until we can afford to build generation ships and identify habitable worlds. But um, the beings that live, that will procreate and live on a world other than Earth, I believe fundamentally by the time that happens will be as different from us as we are from Australopithecine. It's
yeah.
it's not going to be us. It's going to be this thing that we give rise to, and I think that's a noble goal. But I think that if we turn away from trying to make the only home we've ever known habitable. Like I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I think where primacy needs to be had, our primacy should be on making our current home livable as opposed to finding a different one. That's kind of where I land on it.
Yeah, no, I see the value of that. I honestly, what I would like, um, backing it down from the 10,000 foot level to the 5,000 foot level, is to stop wasting all our potential. All the every kid that was born into poverty that might
Yeah,
have that Stephen Hawking brain, but
right.
ends up working at a gas station or whatever. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that work, but you know that he did not use his full potential because he wasn't. There was too many systemic issues keeping him from that. Um,
Mhm.
and we should take every single person who's capable of helping solve those problems, get them focused on the existential problems that we're facing. Uh, let's get us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, some of them can work on space travel. Some of them can work on uh, the environment. Some of them can work on scarcity. And if we had a post scarcity society,
Mhm.
hey, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to. I'm not really super pro communist, but I would the title, the fully automated luxury space communism. That
Yeah.
that because I'm a huge nerd. I love science fiction.
Mhm.
That's half of the problem is that I grew up as a young kid thinking, oh man, when I'm an adult, I'm gonna have my own rocket ship and I'm gonna go to other
Yeah.
planets. And then I got Netflix and TikTok. That's what I ended up with. So a part of me, just looks
Yeah.
back and he's like, oh,
You grew up on Star Trek and wound up in Diet Blade Runner.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
just very, very low intensity,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we got reality shows.
yeah. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, coming back down from like even the 5,000 foot view and getting more into back on the bullshido thing, and since we're talking about differences in politics, is where do you see? Because I know that at one point in the like the zeitgeist, there was this brief time period where conspiracy theory seemed primarily and like woo and bullshit seemed primarily to be a phenomenon of a certain sector of the left,
Yes.
right? There was always like your Bill Coopers and your Art Bells, who I would consider more on the right, but like the majority of people who were involved in what I would say like green text on a black background, like 90s forum conspiracy,
Yeah.
seem to be your hippie adjacent folks.
Yeah.
And now we've gone from not only it being left, but being a fringe movement on the left to being a dominant feature of one political party's political discourse. And I'm wondering, do you personally encounter more bullshit on one side of the political spectrum or another, or how do you parse that?
These days, yes. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the anti-vaxxers were almost exclusively leftist,
Mhm.
uh, and
Yeah,
well, I mean, maybe more liberal than leftist if we're breaking down terms, but
yeah.
the kids that grew up, the hippies, the Age of Aquarius kind of
Mhm.
natural, um, the naturopath sort of people that would go and get crystal healing and that sort of thing is like I don't need what is the pejorative term that they use it as allopathic medicine as opposed to homeopathic and that sort of thing. The people that gravitate um, towards alternative medicine. And
Mhm.
wrote an article a couple years back. Basically, bullshit killed Steve Jobs, who I guess I mean capitalism aside, you could put his surface views a little bit on the left. He's more of a I mean he ran that anti 1984 Mac ad back in
Yeah.
the day, and didn't want that.
Progressive might be a better label
Okay,
than
yeah,
yeah, maybe,
but
I
yeah,
don't know.
you're right.
Yeah.
And so, but he died because he believed. I
Mhm.
mean, he had one of the few rare versions of pancreatic cancer that was operable, that modern
Mhm.
medicine has a great chance of solving. But instead of using modern medicine, he went and did like everything, like crazy
Mhm.
colonics, and God knows. I had a list of them written down. But yeah, he would have survived. We'd probably have better products right now. I don't know. I'm an Android.
Eh. Well, we'd certainly have more.
Yeah,
Um
that's true.
Um, I'm so that is one area where I will admit to being not necessarily a Luddite, but I think we're good with the phone, right? We're good. Like we can stop for a couple years and let that coal tan mine uh take a break for a little while. Like I don't need my phone to do anything more than it does. I don't need a new model that costs $900.
No.
We should probably like that's an area where like I think we're bad at resource management, and where profit motive being the thing that governs how humanity partitions its resources is probably like not great. Like, is um, I
Yeah.
think we could probably chill on some of that a little bit for a little while we got every other stuff figured out. But do, so when you run into bullshit like let me take a step back here. You spend a lot of time in the martial arts community, and I have found, just from observing it on the periphery, that that tends to be kind of a more. There are a lot of really dope dudes in martial arts, really friendly guys. Like I like to compare it with like the metalhead scene. Actually,
Yeah.
like it's very similar vibes and a lot of overlap. But there is also this subset of people who are really, really toxic in those communities, and has that changed in the last 4 years? Has it gotten worse? Has it, like, excluded certain people, or have more people fallen into that, or how has that changed?
Well, to be clear, I haven't trained actively since the pandemic
Mhm.
kicked off. I literally handle positive COVID specimens at work, so and for my
Ah,
full time
gotcha.
job. So I'm like, "Ugh." No, I'm social distancing myself from other people, even while they're running around licking the windows and doorknobs and stuff out there. I live in Texas too, so I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the martial arts in general seems to uh, seems to have fractured,
Mhm.
especially like more the productive, the useful ones like Brazilian jiu jitsu and sambo and the ones that are you know based in reality. Um, those seem to have split over the last couple years into here's the not like a left right thing, but a um, reasonable, rational, conscientious sort of decent dude kind of thing because it's mostly dudes, and then the frothing, the I'm just gonna come out and say it, the Joe Rogan brigade, uh,
Yeah.
the people that like, oh my, yes, just everything hangs off of every word that comes out of the dude's mouth. So it's split down. Basically, you could drive a wedge between do you think Joe Rogan, do you like Joe Rogan or do you not like Joe Rogan? And there's just a tiny bit of overlap. It's like, well, I don't really care. So, but
Yeah.
he seems to have occupied a huge portion of those dudes. They're like that's their role model. That's who they want to be. They want to be just like him. They want to talk to all the important people and
Yeah.
just and he's gotten where he is by pushing a lot of that bullshit.
Yeah. He also sells supplements, to use your earlier heuristic.
Go. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Uh,
Uh, I, uh, I actually thought so this is like an empirical question, right? There's an actual answer to this, but we'll never be able to know what it is how many people are dead today that otherwise would not have been because of Joe Rogan?
uh,
And I sit back and I think about that, and it's gotta be a lot, like, not just in terms of, like, the individual, like, because he's probably right when he's talking to most of his fans who are young and healthy, um, and who are now also disease vectors because of him,
yeah.
and I just wonder, like, what is, like, the R number of Joe Rogan? Like,
Yeah.
and it just it boggles my mind that one man could be so individually destructive at such a critical moment in history, and I don't
Yeah.
know what to do with that information.
He's got a ton of influence, and I mean, to be fair, I used to follow his podcast when he had like the Neil deGrasse Tysons and the Dawkins and the
Mhm.
the more into he even had a biologist on regularly, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who and I haven't listened to the show because it was a while back and I had long since stopped listening, but he I guess she challenged him on a lot of his stuff and his like incoherent views on health, and I don't think that went too well. So it's
Yeah.
he has such a huge reach, and it's a shame to see it being squandered. And the person that compared him to Gwyneth Paltrow for dudes was
Yeah.
just great. In our we have a group, we have our own forums, but we have a group on Facebook, and I think I made the joke. We'll just start calling him Kenneth Paltrow. So and instead
Uh,
of what's his brand? Instead of Goop, we'll call it Gooch because that fits the yeah. So Kenneth Paltrow Gooch. I need to do a Photoshop with like Gooch and like
yeah.
the on it logo. But I mean, he he just needs to be nudged. I don't think he's deliberately a bad actor. I think in there in that brain somewhere, he's just trying to be a showman, but
Mhm.
he hasn't it hasn't clicked in his head that shit, man, you're doing real harm.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just me being a dumbass myself, but I think if somebody managed to reach him about that, he'd be like he'd change his tone until more money came in.
Yeah. I have I have a pretty withering opinion of Joe Rogan personally. I don't actually buy the hokey everyman bit. Like he's a fairly skilled businessman. He got $100 million from Spotify and then moved to Austin, Texas, where there's no federal income tax. And like he lives on $1 million compound and he's been in Hollywood since his 20s. Like that man is so far removed from what it is to be an everyday guy that he might as well be Gwyneth Paltrow. Um, and I think what has happened with him, and I don't know, I can't get inside his head, right? But I think he's just literally high on his own supply. Like he's just believes his own bullshit because he's surrounded himself by people who reinforce that. And I think the only person who could probably get through to him at this point is somebody else who I have a very dim view of, which is Sam Harris, right? I think that's a guy that could probably get to Joe. And to Sam Harris's credit, and I don't get to say that phrase very often, he did actually, like today, I think, like at Joe Rogan
Oh
with,
crap.
"Hey, you need to stop the ivermectin bullshit." So
Yeah,
it's
I
very rare
mean,
I get to say that, but good
I
on
have
Sam for that.
I probably have a more positive take on Sam Harris. I like the more sciency end of his stuff. I
Hmm.
don't go into the. I think I have his meditation app, but I've never opened it. But yeah,
Hmm.
he, I mean, I remember the new atheist thing, and so yeah, maybe we're probably on a different different wavelengths when it comes to that. But you know, I mean, I loved Hitchens just because at
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
time it was important to point out things that
Hmm.
people were glossing over because I understand the natural impulse to push back against what you perceive as bigotry, and
Hmm.
some of that overlaps culture and religion. It's a big mix, and so I get the hostility on his end, but then it's yeah. So I don't want to get too far into it, but yeah, Sam Harris, he disowned the IDW. He
Hmm.
said, "Like this is ridiculous. You guys are now I'm out." And
Yeah.
that I mean that yeah, that was a good thing, and I think he's a net positive, even if you know there's a lot of stuff you can disagree with his takes on things. Um, some of which I don't even get into. I know he's had Charles
Yeah.
Murray on, and you
Yeah.
know those yeah. So
I was gonna say I don't know if I'd qualify him as a net positive considering some of those other things, but I will say, to be fair to Sam, I I would not have ever found moral philosophy as something that interests me were it not for him. I was also a new atheist, little edge lord, and came up in the Church of Sam and Hitchens. But it is actually through repeat exposure to the man and his message that has left me with the distaste that I have for him. I've spent more time with Sam Harris than I think most Sam Harris fans have, and once you kind of understand how the sausage gets made, it's a little less pleasing.
I can see that.
Um, yeah,
That's fair. I mean, I like I said, shoot, I can't even keep up with the podcasts that I have
yeah,
in my queue as it is. So I mean, I listen to things now. Now I've gone from 1.5 speed to 2.0 speed for everything, and I can hear it, and it processes as it goes in there, and it's just I'm there's so much good stuff out there to consume
yeah,
just to stay with it. So I have sort of a FOMO. There's always I missed out on the Joe Rogan thing today because I was doing other things. So
yeah.
the Ham Sam Harris versus yeah. But
It's not a big. I've kind of moved past my disdain for him, and I just try not to think about the man too much.
yeah.
Um, but I think Rogan is. I think if there was somebody who let's just think in pure utilitarian terms, right? Like if there was a person who was going to get through to Joe, it probably would be Sam Harris, and I think that it would be a very good thing if Sam Harris were able to get through to Joe on the anti-vax, anti-mask, ivermectin bullshit.
Yeah.
That would be good for all of us. So I wish Sam Harris the best of luck in that endeavor. I hope he's successful. Uh, like
Yeah,
sincerely.
I hope they pulls it off. That would be great. I mean, yeah, it's just there's just too much of an incentive back to the whole masculinity thing of being uh you know, contrarian to
Yeah.
say, "Oh, well, I'm not going with the herd." You know, I'm not a sheeple or that kind of thing. And at some point you got to realize it's not that they're blindly following. It's that so many of those people have come to a conclusion on their own, and it
Hmm.
happens to be the right conclusion. You just not wanting to come to that make kind of makes you the ass. So you're not a special unique Galileo snowflake. I think that point needs
Yeah.
cannot be made too many times.
Yeah, no, the most occasionally the outside agitator is actually correct and revolutionary, but 99.999% of the times they're just fucking cranks.
Yeah, you're just
Um,
time cube guy.
yeah, maybe if we could get Sam Harris and Bill Burr together, they could do an
Oh, that would
intervention.
be great. Oh man,
Yeah.
can you imagine if we could just merge those two like some sort of Dragon Ball Z fusion into you know some shit talking Bostonian you know
Yeah.
neuroscientist? That would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
Burr is actually an interesting character because he like I've followed his career for a while, and I'm actually quite a fan of him, and he is oddly one of the most progressive stand-up comics, like, of his generation, and somehow has, like, one of the most, like, chuddy fan bases I've ever seen, and I feel like half of Burr's audience just hates the man and shows up to heckle him, and
Yeah,
and I don't get it. Um,
yeah,
and
that's
it's just
great.
his
No,
demeanor. Yeah.
you can tell that he had. I mean, with his rant in was it Philadelphia that is legendary where he just started spent
Yeah.
15 minutes talking shit at the audience, and
Yeah.
that kind of thing
5 more
build
minutes.
yeah builds your credential. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't think a lot of those guys even understand that he's not on their side of things, or maybe they're just they don't think about it too hard. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's a good dude.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming up on an hour. Mindful of your time. Is there anything that you want to? So let me do it this way because I have a predominantly leftist audience.
Yeah.
We're all a bunch of filthy commies over here. Um, if you had a message to throw at that crowd, what would it be? What would you want to telegraph to the folks that might be listening? Uh,
I wouldn't even tie it into a left right thing. It's just, don't miss an opportunity. Everybody will tell you not to argue with an idiot, and this is my big thing. Please argue with an idiot. It sometimes you're not going to win them all. Sometimes you can make a non-idiot out of an idiot, but more importantly, if you can't, it's especially on social media, you're not just arguing with the idiot. You're arguing and everyone is paying attention to it. It's a public thing. So you're not arguing with the idiot for the idiot in those cases, you're arguing for the audience. And every now and then you'll pick some of the people off. It's like having a debate. It's not a one-on-one. There's other people listening to the conversation. And if your points are better, and even if they're a little bit aggressive as we kind of, and
mhm.
hostile and whatever, then you're you're reaching people that might not have considered that otherwise and might just think, oh, yeah, just now if you suck at arguing, don't. I mean, because you're just going to make it look bad for everybody else if you're just throw a history. But if you run into one of those fallacy guys or the people that are like the internet midwit brigade, you can arguing is just like sparring. You get better at
Yeah.
it if you try, and it's important to try because there's so many bad ideas out there. I mean, yeah, maybe the marketplace of ideas doesn't operate as well as okay. Maybe marketplaces in general don't operate as well as we would like them to. However, that one's for the left. However, if you're participating in it and you're trying to do good things, you will occasionally accomplish good things. So just don't back down. Don't back down from the nonsense. Don't the more we the more social sanctions there are against bullshit, the more bullshit gets shoved out of the limelight, swept under the rug. At least it would be under the rug and not like, being dumped on our heads.
Yeah. To tie that into a common sentiment that I hear on my side of things is make it very hard for people to be fascists. Um,
Okay.
right. Yeah. Make it difficult for the people that you interact with to have very, very bad ideas if they're very, very bad ideas. I
Oh,
think
I
there's a
I am I am 100% in the I can't say editorially on the part of Bullshido, but personally, I am in the camp of hey, punch a Nazi,
yeah.
punch a Nazi. And okay, man, there's going to be consequences. There are legal consequences when you hit somebody that's not open to being hit in a mutual sort of, you know,
hmm
martial arts sort of, context. However, there's also moral responsibility. So
hmm
yeah, if they don't, I don't think Richard Spencer's been making too many public appearances lately. So
All right. Yeah, well, we'll leave it at that. That's an excellent spot to peel off on. Thank you. Um, Frost, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you and where you're at and how to get a hold of you?
yeah, I mean bullshido.net's a website. We have our own forums. It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. So I mean, just wondering at your own risk. Like I said, we're all knuckle draggers, and some more than others. Yeah, I mean, I have a Twitter account. I mean, I just tweet whatever's in my head, so there's not anything special. Follow me. It's PHROST. So because I've had Twitter since Twitter went online, basically. And same thing on Facebook too. But yeah, Facebook's dumb. Stay off it. It's terrible. It's a cancer on humanity. That's really it. I'm terrible about self promotion. We're just trying to reduce the number of combative, potentially violent idiots in the world by converting them into combative, potentially violent skeptics and critical thinkers. So,
yeah, admirable goal, and I wish you the best of luck, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. It's been great.
Hey everybody, Mark Edwards again. Thank you so much for watching. I want to give a special thanks to my patrons, whose names should be appearing on screen now on the YouTube channel. If you want to support what I do here, go ahead and head on over to patreon.com and you will find me there at Ultraviolet Pod, and you can become a patron and support me. Right now, I'm not asking for any specific donation amount. I have a goal of $200 a month that will make this channel self-sufficient. I will no longer be operating in the red. And once I do that, I'll start implementing tiers where people will get early access to the audio, the video. You'll have a chance to do or participate in AMA episodes and things like that. So if you want to get in on the ground floor and get access to all of that, go ahead on over there and just donate what you can monthly, and then you will be grandfathered into all that goodness once it arrives. If you don't want to commit monthly and you just want to give me a one-time tip, you can do so via Venmo, Coffee, or PayPal.me. All of that is at Ultraviolet Pod as well. If you cannot afford to support me in any way, no pressure. I understand that. I've been in that type of situation, and I don't want your money if you can't afford to give me anything. But you can still support what I do here by sharing my content on social media. Sharing anything that I do with your friends and family on your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, any blogs you run, that really helps me. It helps get the word out. It helps me with the algorithms. And speaking of algorithms, if you want to give me a 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on, if you want to give a thumbs up on YouTube, if you want to leave a comment, all of that type of engagement really, really helps, and I really, really appreciate it. If you want to interact with me directly, you can find me on social media, on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at Ultraviolet Pod. I'm mostly active on Twitter. I mostly just post episodes on Facebook, and then on Instagram, it's just pictures of the cat, as it should be. On Twitch and Reddit, I am at UVPod. The website is ultravioletpod.com, where I also post all of these videos or all of these uploads. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, you can email me at ultravioletpod@gmail.com. Once again, I want to thank everybody for listening. It really does mean a lot to me to know that there are people out there who are interested in what I think and what the people that I talk to think. And I'm every day that I see the little unique download count on Libsyn or on YouTube increase by even 1 or 2 people, it actually really means a lot to me. So I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate my guests, people who, for reasons I will never know, keep coming on this show to talk to me despite the fact that I have an almost non-existent online footprint. I really, really appreciate that as well. So everybody who has been supportive of this project, I love you, thank you, and I will see you on the next one.